the short refuge prayer. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Sangye chodang soki chonamla shangshu bardu dagni kapsuchi dagi jinsoki pe sonamgi jola penshir sangye jupasho. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Manam kadam yam pe sem chen tam shwe dewa dang dewe gurdang dempa jorchi. Dog now dong do now gi gu dong drawa jorchi. Dog now me pe de wa dong mi drawa jorchi. Ne ring chak dong ni dong drawa tang namla ne pa jorchi. Okay, thank you. So we take refuge and we speak of Bodhichitta. Okay, so what we've been talking about is the method, training, and action Bodhichitta. How do we take this Bodhichitta and put it to work, put it to use, and so on? So we talked about the 6 paramitas, the 6 perfections is what we were talking about last week. So I'm looking at my outline book here, the outline book on page 25. And so here it says the antidote to not knowing the method of practice for achieving Buddhahood. And this method is to engage in the training of action Bodhichitta. So we talked a little bit last week. We mentioned that this has to do with these perfections of generosity, of moral ethics, of patience, of perseverance, of meditative concentration, and of wisdom awareness. So another way of looking at this, organizing these thoughts about this, is to consider that there's these trainings. If we look on the next page, page 26, in the outline, you see that the 3 trainings of the mind. So the training in superior morality, the training in superior thought, and the training in superior wisdom awareness. So we're kind of going to be referring back to these points here and the different contexts in which we can look at these, and it helps to organize our thoughts about this, to recognize this. But what we are doing is we are training ourselves, we are programming ourselves. Or maybe it's better to say we're reprogramming ourselves, because we've been programmed to think and do, behave, and so on in the ways that we've been doing all these years. We've been programmed by our parents, by our friends, by schools, by society in general and so on, and to whatever degree, whatever spiritual group we may be part of or something like that, we've been taught to think in certain ways. So not all of it is bad. It's a perfectly natural way, that we deal with things. We are programmed. And so we need to think in terms of how we are reprogramming ourselves, to be aware of these three mind trainings of the body, the speech, and the mind. So that's what we're endeavoring to do. So before we get too much into the detail of this, does anybody have any thoughts about this? What it is to be programmed and to be wanting to reprogram ourselves? What do you think about that?
One of the general principles of adult education is that it involves a tremendous amount of unlearning.
Okay, when you unlearn something, how do you do that? Do you get the Men in Black pen and you put it in their face and bam, it goes, and you
learn something else.
So you're replacing it.
Yeah, but replacement's not easy. Right.
It would be easier if everything was erased and we got to start over, but to relearn or to learn a new system is more difficult, wouldn't you think?
Right. Well, it's one of the big differences between adult education and child education is that adults have to do more unlearning.
A lot of bad habits have been developed.
Right.
So having said that, I mean, I would assume then that you recognize that as a positive thing. It's not a terrible thing. It's a difficult thing, but not a terrible thing to have to do.
And even if you're trying to relearn them and working earnestly at it, the bad habits that you've learned all your life are reinforced by your social environment, behaviors you see around you, which are behaviors that you've been engaged in. So you're constantly exposed to some of the things that you're trying to change, even though you're trying to change them earnestly. The temptation and bad examples are always there because that's the way the world is.
And under pressure, we regress.
Yes.
Yeah, we're conditioned.
Yeah.
We're conditioned by our genetics, our familial history, our culture, society, to react automatically. The human body loves to be on automatic pilot in order to conserve energy, and if it can react in a certain way just because that's what's always been done, it will do that if it can save the energy that it takes to to first of all look at a belief as if it might be wrong, and second of all chase down information that might validate that assumption or prove otherwise. It's really our conditioned responses are the death of us. They, especially psychologically, but physically also, conditioned responses are those are self-defense mechanisms, and very often self-defense doesn't work on defense of our real self. It's in defense of our deluded being.
Well, thank you for wearing the resilience shirt.
Oh yeah. We bounce back, right? And we bounce back better. So, but there was Dan Siegel says that mindfulness training can be like performing neurosurgery on yourself, because not only can you change your conditioned responses and your conditioned reactions psychologically and psychophysically, but you change the structure of your brain, and that's semi-permanent. So that's real change. But you've heard neurons that fire together wire together. So that's a saying about neuroplasticity. Our brains can change, so our ideas can change, but it takes some repetition, and it takes some incentivizing, some indication that we're on the right path, some warm fuzzy feelings that make us move forward and accept certain things as evidence.
Tom, did you want to say something?
So is it possible to say that you can teach an old dog new tricks? I mean, it is, coming to the Vajrayana from Mahayana, it was a big pill. It was a big pill to swallow. And yeah, I mean, it wasn't easy. It took reconditioning. That's basically what it took.
What was the most difficult aspect?
The visualizations, that was difficult. And I guess dealing with, instead of cutting out certain thoughts, but by accepting them and turning them into positive thoughts, or turning the 5 poisons to the 5 wisdoms, instead of cutting off the 5 poisons. Little things like that. It took a while, but it can be done. But it's that in a lot of the Mahayana orders, there's a cutoff age for monastics. They set up an age cutoff because after a certain point, it's very difficult to recondition someone else into following that particular order. So they'll cut it off at 50, or they'll cut off at 55, or an age around there. Because it can be done, but it's just, it's much easier conditioning an 18-year-old, a 17-year-old, that has a blank canvas, than trying to, erase a canvas and rewrite it. That's just, that's very difficult, because we already have our preconceptions and our notions, and in our ideas that that are pretty solid. So, but it can be done, but it just
Never understood how that can be done. And I'm not saying that it can't. I'm saying that I don't understand it. If I look at the 5 poisons, attachment and aversion, what wisdom do you turn attachment into? I mean, what direction?
What's the antidote for attachment? It's giving, right? Or the 5 poisons are what? Desire, anger,
Attachment,
ignorance, jealousy,
pride.
pride.
Yeah.
And Lance has gone over the antidotes for those over and over. And in the Mahayana path, a lot of this stuff is just to cut off those things, just completely cut it off, instead of using them on the path and using them as a source of wisdom, to learn from them, not just cut it off. So, there's a lot, there's different aspects that I had to really relearn, but what my past has done is given me a very solid foundation on dedication, devotion, and faith.
Joseph, welcome. We're talking about We're talking about having to change our minds, how to, what's involved with that, and how we have preconceived ideas and so on. And under pressure, no matter what we've learned, we seem to have a tendency to regress to those things that we've formed these habitual tendencies about or something. And so we're in the middle of this, or just started this conversation really about that. So I want to ask this is, what value do you think, and we've got a number of educators here and people who have been involved in education, what value do you think that teaching has in this process for the teacher to change? Is it required that the teacher be perfect, or can the teacher be instructing those who may be younger or just not as involved with the process and so on? Can the teacher be learning as they are teaching, and is there a benefit there?
No, I'm sorry, you asked me.
No, I'm finished. Ed, what do you think? Ed Jones.
Ed me or Ed?
Ed Jones.
Oh. I don't know what I think. It'll come to me. With certain ways.
Well, does anybody else have a comment about that? What value do you think that teaching has? And go ahead, Ed.
Oh, I'm sorry. It came back. There's been research done on mentoring. Mentoring.
Yes.
Most of it has focused on the impact of mentoring on the mentee or the protege or whatever it's called.
Yes.
Very little, relatively speaking, has been done on the impact of the mentor. And yet what has been done suggests that the impact on the mentor is significant. And in some cases, perhaps more than on the person mentored.
In a positive way or a negative way?
A positive way. By being involved in another person's growth experience, one has one's own growth experience.
Have you seen that as being a father in your families, or maybe there's another figure in your family, seeing that with children and the father figure, the mother figure?
Yeah, there's a little placard somewhere that says, children are the best adult educators.
Yeah.
And I think that's true. I mean, I think my engagement with my own children has been conducive to my own growth. I hope, anyway. I feel that it is.
Okay, good. Anybody else have any words of wisdom here or confusion that you'd like to express, to talk through? I think it's interesting what Tom brought up, the idea that in some culture or whatever, that there is a artificial or some cutoff that is made, to say, okay, you've kind of saturated this life, and you're going to have to wait to your next life to really make any big changes. Because in essence, I think that's part of what the philosophy is saying there. So what we do, and what I think Gary was opening the door to, was, well, what do we do in the meantime? Does that mean that person who is, say, 50 years old, who has reached that cutoff age now, do they just wander around for the next 20, 30 years that they have left in their lives? What do they do? So the answer to that would be that we develop our aspirations. And in our Buddhist, tradition, aspirations are a huge part of what we are doing, is cultivating those aspirations, because they become the changes, the causes for the changes that we're looking for. Gary, did you want to make a comment? You got your microphone turned on.
Oh, no, I think that what you said is very useful to me. You and I are about the same age, and I came to Buddhism late in my life. So aspirations would probably be very important for me. Not that I will not continue to try to make changes every day. But in my long life, I've become acculturated to certain behaviors and certain paradigms of behaving, which I'm trying, many of which I'm trying to cast off now. But it's very, very hard.
Yeah.
So within the realm of Buddhism, aspirations would prepare me to continue my pursuit of enlightenment in a future life, or in my case, probably a number of future lives, but to establish the horizon that I want to move towards. Because at this point in my life, I've got to be realistic. I've got to aspire every day to do the right thing, but I've got to recognize that those deeply ingrained, aversions and reactions are going to be something I have to wrestle with constantly.
Can you describe the horizon you want to move toward, or is that too comprehensive?
Well, it can be very simple. I can say it in a broad sense. There are many things I don't want to react to or attach the same importance to or priority to that I have been taught to all my life. For instance, one thing I've been doing lately, and with a great deal of restraint, bless you,
Excuse me,
is not having to contend with someone who I know is saying something that is completely wrong in terms of their treatment of view of their fellow human beings. And I know that it is wrong because I've been wrong in that way for many years. This is how we solve problems between individuals, between groups, between nations. I've realized that the same problems keep occurring because we keep applying the same solutions that don't work. And what I can do now is try not to apply the solutions that don't work anymore. And the only way that I can do that is by governing my own actions. I can't govern the actions of other people, very few. And so my limitations are what I can change about me. And that's after a lifetime of being involved in different realms where the idea was to change the behaviors of broad groups of people of the world. And as an individual, I have to concentrate from here to the end of this life on what I can do. That doesn't mean I won't try to help someone or advise someone if it's sought, but it's basically changing myself and my own reactions to things is the thing that I can do. Sometimes.
okay, I want to bring Joseph into the conversation, hear his thoughts. But before that, I just want to follow through on this one idea that we've been talking about, and that is teaching and reteaching or relearning maybe a different approach to teaching, a different language of teaching or something like that. And Michael, what he's doing now, and Ed Jones and Tom and myself are part of a group that Michael is doing right now, where he's teaching mindfulness meditation. And it's very interesting to me for a number of different reasons, but I'm curious as to what Michael has to say about it in terms of expressing this mindfulness meditation philosophy or method or whatever in these terms like that, because there are different terms than the ones that we use in our Buddhist practices or in Western spiritual practices or something like that. What do you think about that, Michael?
Well, I think I need to be careful bringing up buzzwords like mindfulness and meditation together if I don't want to get myself in a situation where I need to define something in terms that other than folks are used to hearing them in. So I would rather not, in this context, discuss my life in that space. Unless, I'm not here to teach this group. You are.
Well, it's, the thing I'm trying to get to is the point of having to kind of rephrase things, of how to, find a different way to approach things so that, and how does that change you as the teacher? Like Ed was saying, that the mentor, becomes an object of change themselves.
I think that's a necessary relationship. I don't think any of us changes without changing the universe. And that certainly includes people we're in relationship with. I think every dyad there are both teachers and both learners. And I think in the world today, I think teacher is more of a title than an activity. And so we need to be careful how we identify what's happening in a learning space. But I learned long ago, when I began my master's studies, that in a learning community, everybody's a learner and everybody's a teacher.
True.
And the best of teachers will state that right out front. John O'Connor was the best of teachers, and one of the first things he said was, "I'm here to learn as much about life from you as you are of me." I'm the old guy in the room, so I might be able to. I know where the books are, I know where the articles are, and I know what people are talking about, but I don't know the material. I don't know your life experience. So in a learning community, there is nobody that knows better than others. There's just possibility and evidence and research and questions and lots of answers coming from different places and different spaces. So, I don't believe it's as clear cut. Even in terms of Vajrayana, I have a problem. I don't have a problem. I'm not as serious about revering individuals that have titles, because I haven't experienced any reason that endows them with ultimate authority over certain aspects of my life, at least. So when it comes to my life, I'm the expert. And when it comes to my life experience, it's the one thing I have that I control. So I'm not ready to yield that quite yet.
So Ed Joseph, one thing you didn't hear that we were talking about as we introduced this was that what the paramitas, these 6 perfections, are dealing with are these 3 mind trainings. The 3 mind trainings are the overall context of what we're experiencing, what we're trying to accomplish within ourselves. We're trying to train our mind in superior morality. We're trying to train our mind in superior thoughts. And we're trying to train our mind in superior wisdom awareness. So these are the 3 mind trainings that that all this is kind of couched in. So I wonder if you have any comments about any of what you've heard so far, what you've thought about this, or what you bring to the what you bring in your experience.
Yes, definitely. Thank you and good evening. That I think just life, this very life, what we call life, that the moment to moment is most of the time where one or a person is not mindful, right? They just do things habitually and that happens through environmental conditioning, whether it's from a culture, whether it's from the culture at large, religion, a belief, perception, within that immediate environment. And yet, once one becomes to the awareness, and it happens differently for each person. So, for example, for me, there were things that I was doing. I remember in 2000, specifically, I remember this because I had people around me. I had because I was a computer engineer, and I remember 2 of my colleagues said to me, around me, for whatever reason, they behave differently around me. And I'm like, why? And that's just said, you know what, there's just something about you. So for me, I know I'm very positive. I'm very positive, and yet I want to experience reality. Then later on, from 2000 to about 2011, that's when I discovered, I used to hear the word mindfulness, I used to hear the word meditation, prayer, supplication, contemplative prayer, and so on and so forth. I did not understand none of those things because I'm like, how do you turn off your mind? How do you turn it off? Because they said, you know what, you could stop your thought, things like this. And I tried to understand it. It could not happen. Then I've learned that to just, I want to say there's nothing that happens by accident, but just through, I guess, seeking and even questioning that, how do you stop your mind? Then that became a focus for me to try to stop my mind. And interestingly, to some extent, I can do it. I could just begin to imagine an empty space. If I'm imagining, if I am imagining, am I stopping my mind? Because I'm still doing something consciously, right? And whereas if I seek not to stop my mind, then my mind stops. So with the parameters in terms of the, the generosity, the being to be able to persevere, to be able to develop the awareness of thoughts, because the thoughts are there, they come and go, and that's why it keeps us alive, right? And in that, when the thoughts come, to see it for what it is, to see them for what they are. Because when you see the thoughts, okay, when you see once you begin, that's my experience now. Once I begin to see the thoughts for what they are, then I begin to not attach to the thoughts. Then I become aware of what's going on within me and around me. It's almost like what I did. Because there were times that I create a distance between the thoughts, the sensation, and whatever was happening around me. It looked like I was just observing it. Then that brought about almost like it feels like I was in, when I am in that state, it's like I feel like I'm in slow motion. So with the three aspects of you mentioned the thoughts, the wisdom of insight,
The morality, speech,
morality,
thoughts, and awareness.
And awareness. So morality in that, it's like what you engage in all the time, you begin to manifest within your life. So when I begin to focus on not morality because somebody says so, just my own value base. I take morality, yes, from my culture, from the religion, Catholicism, Protestantism, and then now Buddhism, and which is like, to me, it's like psychology. And then if something will hurt you, that very thing will hurt another person. That's my morality. That's where I bring in the morality and refine it from there.
All right, thank you. That was very good. I'd like to now bring it a little more pointed about these points here: the perfection of generosity, moral ethics, and so on. So, Joseph, do you have one of these books? I think I sent you an email with this. I don't know whether you received it or printed it or whatever, but this is the outline from which we're talking. And I sent you a message just last week asking if you had received that or not. So Ed, I can't, you turned your mic off. Do you have this?
Yes, I'm gonna check for it.
Okay, all right, very good. I'd like to do this now because this is a discussion group, and I presume everybody has a copy of this in front of them. I hope so. So I'd like to begin. Why don't we do this? Michael, would you begin, please? On page 25, in the section below the center of the page, it says Chapter 12, Perfection of Generosity. And it gives a short explanation of what this means. Would you read that out loud? And would you give your impression, your expression of what that means to you? What do you think that means? This perfection of generosity.
Lance, how can I say it better than what's typed here? This is the definition.
Well, that's what I want you. I'd like you to read it out loud first.
Okay.
And then maybe talk a little bit about it, and maybe we can open a discussion up about that. That's all.
Chapter 12 is the perfection of generosity. How to open one's heart and mind and learn how to share all necessary things, such as skills and wisdom. It cuts narrow-mindedness, jealousy, pride, and greed, and actualizes harmony and freeing from stinginess and clinging. So the one thing that strikes me is the clause, how to share all necessary things, such as skills and wisdom. You know, I think we Westerners think most commonly about generosity as as the giving of things, and things of value, and maybe even of time, which is of value. So this is definitely has a narrower range than most of us might consider when we think about generosity.
Yeah, I was struck by the same thing, that it wasn't talking about dollars and possessions as much as it was about time and quality of thoughts and expression. Anybody else got something you can add to this?
You always talked about the outer and the inner and the secret. All three of those are listed here. You know, the outer would be harmonizing and freeing from stinginess and clinging. That'd be the most basic of generosity, to give monetarily. And the inner would be to cut narrow-mindedness, jealousy, pride, and greed. And the secret meaning would be to open one's heart and mind. So right there, just that first paramita. If you can just perfect that, if you can just spend one lifetime just doing that one, I think you would have great wisdom. Because all three aspects, what we're trying to get at, the outer, inner, and the secret teachings are all right there. You know, but like I said, I mean, we tend to overlook a lot of fundamental small things and tend to belittle it, or, you know, because it's, you know, it's, well, I mean, even for myself, I look at things and, you know, I'll just pass over and think, oh, you know, that's very basic things. But, you know, just the very first teachings we get, I mean, the very first prayer that we do, a lot of our teachings, you know, the altruistic motivation, just with that one prayer. If you went into a cave and to mindfully meditate on that, just one prayer, you will realize your true nature. You don't need a book. You don't need a whole wall full of books. Because if you don't practice that after reading it, what good is it? So really, just that one thing that Michael had read about the perfection of generosity. If we can just, you know, slow down, just try to practice that one thing to perfection, to you know, I think that'd be a wonderful thing.
Very good. Thank you. Anybody else have a comment about the generosity aspect?
I think it raises a point about, well, the 5 poisons, or you may not conquer the 5 poisons by taking them on directly. You know, I will not be greedy, you know, I will not be prideful. But if you engage in generosity, you combat your poisons indirectly in a way that may be by doing something else. I was treated in the first half of my life, several different periods, for obsessive thinking, and I get thoughts in my head and run them endlessly, like the analogy back then was a record player needle being stuck in a groove. And as Ed Joseph was talking earlier, I mean, I couldn't stop my mind. Well, one of the insights I was given was, if you want to stop thinking about red monkeys, you don't do that by gritting your teeth and saying, I will not think about red monkeys. You think about blue monkeys. And seriously, I mean, that to me is a way to combat poisons. Is not to take them on directly, but to fill your space with something else. And then they die of their own, or diminish of their own accord.
What do you think about, many times I've said, there's the what, the why, and the how of all these ideas that we're discussing and so on. So if we're changing the what, red monkeys to blue monkeys,
Right.
I think that has a value.
Yeah.
What about changing the why? Or why are we thinking about blue monkeys? Or why should we be thinking about red monkeys, or whatever? Be able to look at the causes, and then also to look at the how that we do that. Does that become a valid system?
I think it does down the road, but I think when you cannot stop your mind, and those red monkeys are just always there, you got to get them out of there, and the way to get them out of there is not to fight the red monkeys. It's to engage blue monkeys, and then if you're successful in doing that, then you get into the why and the how, and I mean, you can analyze it, but
is that like somebody trying to stop smoking cigarettes, having an addiction, and instead of smoking cigarettes, they're chewing a toothpick all the time or something like that?
Yeah, I think they're all analogous. But Tom was saying something earlier, and that's how I got into the poisons, I think, or I may have misunderstood it. I tend to misunderstand a lot, but about converting negatives to positives. Did you say something like that, Tom? Yeah.
Sure. Lance has taught this many times,
Yeah.
In the Vajrayana, we take to, it's like, in the Hinayana, if they saw a poisonous tree,
Yeah.
they would just go around it, avoid it. In the Mahayana, they would probably try to dig it up and get rid of it.
Yeah.
In the Vajrayana, they would try to make a medicine out of it. So the 5 poisons are what? Hatred, desire, ignorance, greed, jealousy, or envy. And what's the opposites of those? What are the antidotes for those things? Hatred would be loving kindness. Desire would be the faults of seeing the faults of samsara.
Okay. But
ignorance,
if I cultivate generosity,
Mhm.
you were saying this one thing could be enough. If I cultivate generosity and I do it well enough,
Sure.
that's I don't have to take on jealousy and pride directly.
Oh no, I'm not. You don't have to take on.
I've substituted. Yeah.
It's like the
I've
Vinayas.
substituted blue monkeys for red monkeys.
Sure, the Vinayas are the moral ethics that monastics take on, 250 of them. And the Buddha said, instead of trying to worry about all 250, pick one. Pick one of those. And try to not do that one thing for your whole entire life. So that's being mindful. That's being one-pointed. So generosity, like I said, what Michael read, it gives all the outer, the meaning of it, the inner meaning of it, and the secret meaning of it. And the outer would be the very basic of not being stingy and clinging to things, And then the inner meaning would be to cut our narrow-mindedness, to cut our jealousy and our pride. And the secret meaning, the real deep meaning of it is also to have it open one's heart and mind, to learn how to share the necessary things. You know, because I mean, you can give monetarily and have an agenda for it, you know, make you look good, make others look, make yourself look good in front of others. And, you know, you can act like you have mindfulness and, you know, you're not jealous and prideful and have greed. And you can act like that, you know, that you actually have an open heart and an open mind. But until you really actualize those things, it's very difficult. So, you know, so even if you spent, you know, your whole life just trying to perfect this one perfection, it wouldn't be a waste of a lifetime.
All right, let's move to the next one. And Ed, will you read this? Ed Jones, will you read the one that is the next one that says chapter 13, the perfection of moral ethics?
Perfection of moral ethics. Mahamudra is the result of complete perfection of purification. The purer your discipline, the greater your mental clarity and suchness of the mind are the meaning of Mahamudra.
So can you comment on that, please?
There are a couple of words and phrases I'm hazy about, but there's nothing in there I take exception to. I don't know what suchness of the mind.
Well, such is the mind. This is the mind. The suchness of the mind, the reality of the mind. And seeing it clearly.
The complete perfection of purification. The purer your discipline, the greater your clarity. Well, I don't know how to expand on that.
What question do you have about it? Besides those words that you already brought up.
Well, I don't know that it helps me a whole lot. I mean, I think it's pretty self-apparent. Of course, a lot of this, because something is self-apparent doesn't mean it's not useful. I don't know. I'm kind of stymied to go on how to go further with this, Lance. I don't know.
Okay. Anybody else have a comment about the moral ethics here that are being described as perfection? I think one of the things that it's bringing to our attention is to try and define what mind is. And how much stock have we put into mind all our lives? Gary, you turned your microphone on. Did you have something you wanted to add to this?
Well, I was thinking the perfection of moral ethics strikes me as the wiping away of mental clutter. In your mind. In many ways, I think that as I'm reading this, purification, pureness of discipline, and mental clarity is the absence of clutter in things that you don't do, that you don't think about, and that you don't involve yourself in, that you have, and focus is a word that comes to mind, which brings with it a type of peace, the absence of thinking about or investing yourself in some of the calamity of life, both personal and general. There's a focus on obtaining that sense of peace and emptiness that to which we all aspire.
Do you think that there are choices that are involved?
Yes, well, the choice is to be involved or not to be involved in some things.
How about to recognize mind, to understand, well, what is mind? Is there a choice to do that, or is there a choice to just take it for granted? Oh, that's my mind.
Well, I think within our realm, what we want to move towards is a type of peace and emptiness, and by that I don't mean indifference to certain things in the world and people around us, but a focus on our own peace. And in doing that, if we're successful in doing that, I think that the type of clarity and energy that emanates from us imparts that peace to others. There have been people that I've been around in life that had such a serenity about them. And by that, I don't mean indifference and lack of caring, but they had a type of serenity that made me feel serene. Very few people I've met like that, but I have met them.
Yeah.
It would be good to be that way if I can make my way towards that path. And when I read this,
Well, what do you think the word Mahamudra means? Because I used the word Mahamudra in this description twice.
First word and the last word.
So what is Mahamudra? What does that have to do with mind? What does it have to do with morality?
well, I've been talking about peace, and I've been talking about a sense of emptiness and moral clarity. And the Mahamudra to me is a realm. It's probably not a good word, but it's the word I have at the moment, where the calamity of the world can't get into your mind. And it's not because you're fiercely concentrating on keeping it out. It's because
how about the word purification? That calamity has been purified?
well, certainly the absence of calamity and purification are fellow travelers, I think. Purification, by the definition that I've gone by in my life and learned, is the elimination of impure elements. And that could be things in the mind like inclinations to violence, hatred, contempt, those types of emotions. And those could be part of the path to Mahamudra and could be a part of what Mahamudra is really all about in our life. And so you achieve that. If you're getting there, I think that the energy that flows from that is felt by people around you in the way that I described earlier, that I felt by being around a few particular people in my life that had this sense of, I think that what they might have had was Mahamudra. And it can be contagious to a point. I haven't defined that very well, but I've tried.
I believe everything you've said resonates with me, right down to the few people I've encountered in my life. I mean, that had that serenity about them. And my difficulty is, I don't think of that as perfection of moral. Well, I have not been conditioned to think of serenity as the perfection of moral ethics. I've been conditioned to think that moral ethics requires proactivity. I mean, requires me to go out and do something. Not that I do it, but for the good of the world, to help other people, that may not allow me complete serenity. So everything, what I'm having trouble is matching what you said, all of which I agree with, to the title, Perfection of Moral Ethics.
Let me try and put a little bit of perspective. Number one, remember that each one of these two sentences here is a condensation of an entire chapter.
Right.
Now, these chapters may only be 3 or 4 or 5 pages. They're not heavy duty, but they're packed with lots of meaning. They're packed with references. And this outline is a means to trigger our remembrance of what we were experiencing while we were reading these chapters. So if we haven't taken the time to read the chapters, we're kind of,
And I have not.
Yeah. So, and that's part of the point here, is being able to, really dig into what's being transmitted to us. These books, and I'm not trying to disparage anybody or anything like that, but these books have come with great generosity and great compassion, whose people who have spent an entire lifetime, if not maybe half a lifetime, to be able to bring all this stuff together and into one volume that we can read that reflects so many great thinkers of the time and so on. And these points are all timeless. So, we get out of things that which we put into them is part of my point here. So, the other thing is, our job today is to be able to start to unpack this and start to recognize the process of what we're trying to do. We're trying to learn the method of being able to perfect our mind, the perfection of the mind, of superior body, of superior thought, and of superior awareness is what we're doing. So it's incumbent upon us to dig in a little bit and try and study a little bit.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You were going to say something.
No, I was just going to ask whether these two sentences to you describe what you would describe what your understanding of perfection of moral ethics is.
It is a inner meaning. It is not the obvious outer meaning. There
Okay.
is an inner meaning, like Tom said, there is an outer meaning to everything. There is an inner meaning that sometimes we have to be taught, or we have to go through a process of intellectual investigation, research, to be able to understand all the nuance and all the permutations of what the meaning is. But then there is the secret meaning, which is the meaning that we have when we have done those first two, and now we process that into our lives. We become the embodiment of that. So I think that this moral ethics is speaking, mainly to that inner part, but is knocking on the door of the secret part. The secret part is the Mahamudra. What is Mahamudra? Mahamudra, Michael wrote a chat here. He just said, well, literally, it is the great gesture. A mudra is a gesture, but it also can be described as a position. It also could be that our body could be in a particular mudra, our entire body, our entire mind can be in a particular position. A point of view can be a mudra. So Mahamudra is a very, very subtle but profound concept, a word that we use to try and understand something that is very, very subtle. So sometimes we look at these things through similes and through characteristics. So the three characteristics of Mahamudra is, number one, there is clarity. Number two, there is emptiness. And number three, there is unimpededness. Those are the three characteristics of Mahamudra, of the Mahamudra mind. That's what we're talking about. So this moral ethics means that when we are able to have the ethics of being clear all the time, the ethics of emptiness, that we recognize that we're all made up of this compounded nature that is all contrived. It's all fabricated. It's empty of its own true nature. And that this mind that is in that way, this multiplicity of the things that this mind can do and can be conceive and do, is unimpeded. We can go anywhere, be anybody, be anything at any time, completely with we set our own limits. So that's what it speaks to me. How does it speak to me like that? Because I've contemplated an awful lot.
Yeah.
I've read this book many times, from cover to cover, and from just going into particular sections and doing it, and that's what this is all about, isn't it? It's about trying to understand, and we can say, look, this is a waste of time. I don't have to do this. I was very happy the way I was before. But we are who we are, and we're doing what we're doing, and it implies that we are trying to understand something that is common to all of us, our spirituality. And it requires, effort. And maybe you can get it many different ways, many different places, and so on. But here it's being offered this way. So we're having a discussion about this.
Fair enough.
Sorry for the long,
Yeah.
for the long thing.
Hi, Zara.
Hi, everyone.
Zara,
Zara,
Hi, I
Hi, Zara.
apologize for my tardiness. I'm traveling and I just got in. I was on the road and I didn't have strong signal. So this is truly, I'm grateful to jump on and hear this. Thank
Yeah,
you.
but I don't suppose you've got this book, do you? You're with you, the 101 outline book?
No, I don't have anything
Okay.
with me right now.
All right. Ed, I sent you, I took a photograph of these pages. I don't know if you saw that. I emailed that to you just now
Okay, let me see.
for your benefit. You know, and Zara, if you like, I can email it to you real quick if you think it'll be helpful. You know, while you're here for the rest of this session, that we can have a conversation and understand where we are and everything. But we're talking about the 6 paramitas, the 6 perfections of being a human being. These are the perfections of being a human being.
and we need you, Zara, for you, but also because we have no women and we had none last week.
Did you miss my talking? My chatterbox voice?
All right.
Missed you.
Good, thank
All
you.
right.
Could you
So
send
let
those-
me, all right, so let's move along if we can. Gary, would you mind reading about chapter 14, the perfection of patience? So would you read that and then open the conversation with your thoughts on that?
Excuse me, I lost my place. My book closed.
Page 25.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that's training, page 25, training in Bodhichitta, training in action Bodhichitta.
Yes, and so down in the lower part, the lower half of the page.
Perfection of patience.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Perfection of patience, a special method to counter and overcome the obstacles, ignorance, aversion, anger, and hatred, to peace and harmony in the relative and absolute states. Well, these obstacles are, I think, things that we encounter almost daily in life as it is today. Patience is to me a way of not succumbing to what would be our initial reaction to any particular event or situation, which would in this case be we would view as an obstacle or challenge. Sometimes you just have to wait things out and observe the event or listen to what is being said, or allow to happen whatever is happening patiently to understand what it really means. Because sometimes, for instance, given the example of someone saying something to which you would have a reaction, perhaps a negative reaction, patience would involve listening carefully until you understand what they really mean. Because when someone says something to which you would have a negative reaction, sometimes they really mean something else. I have found that in the case with me and in the case with many people in many situations I've been in, that the words people say are not what they really mean. And what they are complaining about perhaps is not what is really bothering them. And if you are patient and wait, and perhaps engage in some sort of dialogue with them, and the fullness of time, in the course of that dialogue, you find out what they really mean and what the problem really is. And my shortcoming has been because of the training I've had, the culture I've been raised in, when something happens which you would define as a problem, or something is you would define as a problem, you take care of it right now. You don't wait and let it become a bigger problem. You have to do something about it. The solution has to be implemented. You can't just let it grow. Sometimes it needs to grow, or sometimes it needs to redefine itself. Sometimes it needs to reveal what it really is. Sometimes things are not what they seem.
Very good. Yeah. So I was just gesturing as you said that. I had that of settling down. Sometimes things just have to settle down.
Yes.
Sometimes in a conversation can get very heated. Emotions come up, but you have to sometimes have patience to let things settle back down, and then you can, go back into the conversation without the heat.
Well, I think that we're seeing that constantly now, more than ever. And I've been reading a lot about it to try to understand it. The world that we live in has created, with the technology of social media and other things, the ability, both the ability and the inclination to react immediately and to counterpunch, as it were. And it is not a communication structure that we have let ourselves become involved in because of the technology available to us that encourages patience. It encourages just the opposite. And that's the type of world we're living in now. And it's giving us tools not to be patient. And it's encouraging us to use those tools. And I have fallen victim to that.
Do you think in this way, tell me if you think this is a stretch, but do you think that we're thinking more like animals and less like human beings? That we're being just very instinctive. Oh, here's somebody says something and bam, here's my reaction. It's a fight or flight. It's a fight or flight. But a human being can stay their ground and try and work it out, try and figure it out.
Well, in the past, I think you made a good point. I think in the past, we've had more time to develop a more human reaction because we didn't have available to us always in terms of communications technology, the ability to strike back quickly before we had time to reflect and ruminate and on what the issue or the question really was. The inclination today seems to be, an immediate reaction, immediate rebuttal, or an immediate counterstrike. It's not it's not a momentum towards resolution. It's a momentum towards defeating whatever you think you need to defeat instead of resolving what needs to be resolved.
Would anybody else like to comment further on this?
I think that's spot on what you just said. I fully agree with that. I'm thinking about, because I do deal with a lot of social media for the work I do. And some of the stuff, so I'm constantly in that environment where it's that people just immediately are reacting. So I'm kind of inundated with it. And so I can see the wisdom in what you've just said as an observation. So.
What's your solution for it?
For myself, or you mean for more just for the population?
Well, for you personally, I mean, how do you deal with it?
Oh, Lance, every single day people give me opportunities to deal with my afflictive emotional states every single day. I literally have a rule that I have a 24-hour rule. I have a rule. It's a black and white rule. You're not allowed to respond for 24 hours because I know my initial response will not be the same in 24 hours. Because it's left and right dealing with so many things in the line of work I do where it's like people are constantly giving me opportunity to practice. But I wasn't as good as I am now, Lance. Like years ago, I would be so reactive, like so defensive to shut someone else down and overtalk them or use my ego. I had to learn that in order to survive in the business world, like insert a pause. And then now it's easy. Now it's not even, now I'm like, oh, no problem. Like now I'm like, okay, cool. You're having a bad day. So now it's different, but before it had to be a rule or I was reactive.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have a comment? Okay, well then, Tom, would you mind reading and commenting on the next chapter, that blurb there for chapter 15, the perfection of perseverance. So Zara, I sent you a picture of the book. If you have the ability to bring it up, you want to see that. And Ed Joseph, I sent it to you too. So if you have an opportunity to see that, then, I'd like to call on you and ask you to read the next groups. So Tom, please go ahead with chapter 15.
The perfection of perseverance. A particular antidote to laziness, the 8 worldly concerns, like chasing rainbows. It is to enhance the good qualities of wisdom and compassion through consistent mindfulness, or purifying all the non-virtuous thoughts and actions.
Maybe read it again. That's pretty packed full of stuff there.
A particular antidote to laziness, the 8 worldly concerns, like chasing rainbows. It is to enhance the good qualities of wisdom and compassion through consistent mindfulness of purifying all the non-virtuous thoughts and actions. Oh boy, that's like you said, that's a lot going on there, huh? Whenever I listen to Kempo Samdu give a teaching, he will say, instead of using the word perseverance, he'll use joyful effort. That whatever we do, whatever it may be, that we should have joy in doing whatever it may be that we're doing. And in this particular explanation is it's an antidote to laziness. And I am lazy. Oh boy, if I can be really lazy. I mean, if it wasn't for this, Oh man, I do all kinds of silly things, and the 8 worldly concerns. And we're constantly think about these things, pleasure and pain, gain and loss, That's most of the time, so I think that's what we're always thinking about. And like they said, it's like it's like those 8 worldly concerns are like a rainbow. Yeah, we can see them, but is it real? No, it's not. We think it is, but we don't want to let it go. And we want to persevere. We want to be the best that we can be at whatever we may want to be. And is to enhance the good qualities of wisdom and compassion, the 2 accumulations. Those are the 2 accumulations that it takes to become a Buddha, an awakened one. Wisdom, merit. I guess merit would come from compassion. And those are the things that we cultivate on a daily basis. We do over and over and over and over, not because we want to, because we have to, because for the benefit of all beings, not for just ourselves. And through those actions, we become an awakened one. And then through mindfulness of purifying all non-virtuous thoughts and actions. Well, I mean, those thoughts happen, constantly. We're having thoughts, even monastics, even people that are taking the vows, years. I mean, there's stories of arhats or Buddhist students not wanting to be around awakened people that have certain clairvoyance, because they can see their unwholesome thoughts. Just because we wear a robe or give out a certain perception doesn't mean we don't have these unwholesome thoughts. But we try constantly to have pure thoughts. And our actions, all the Buddhas have become Buddhas because of good actions. And that's what we have to persevere to do. To have good action in whatever we do, whatever it may be. And without this perseverance, it's impossible, I would say, to get through these paramitas. Because on a daily basis or at a momentary, every moment, we have to constantly be telling ourselves that this is the path to enlightenment. This is what we have to do to awaken. So we do it. We do it joyfully. We don't do it because, this is what you have to do, but with joy.
Thank you. Joyful effort. Does anybody else have a comment? Anything you want to talk about regarding the perseverance, joyful effort?
Lance, what does joyful effort mean to you when you hear those words?
Well, that you are digging in to whatever it is, and you're doing it with a happiness, with a joyfulness, and that so the effort of doing that has to be a joyful effort, has to be happy. You're not doing it because you got somebody that is forcing you to do it. They're not have a gun at your head or something like that. It's because you want to do it. I want to study. I want to read this book. I want to understand these deeper concepts of life. I want to understand the multiplicity of my possibilities and my choices, and what it is that leads me to those choices, good, bad, or indifferent, so that I can have a complete life. I can make good choices. And maybe my choices are to not pay attention to certain things because I find that those certain things are just a waste of time. But I'm able to make that decision based on my having investigated them and seen that, yeah, they do waste my time. There are certain things I just shouldn't be doing. But then there are other things that might be much more difficult to do that are the most rewarding things that I have to do. Or maybe it's have the conversation with somebody that I really don't want to have a conversation with them because I know that they're really going to say some things that are going to potentially upset me and so on. And I postpone the conversation, I postpone it. But I gird myself at some point and I say, okay, let's have the conversation. And so with patience and the other qualities that we're talking about, I enter into the conversation with joy. It all has to be done with joy. You know, that's a key element. We talk about the 4 immeasurable qualities of bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is the wholly enlightened mind. So loving kindness, compassion, then joy. And then the next is equanimity, that it doesn't matter whether I love you, or it doesn't matter whether you love me or not. I'm going to love you. You don't have to agree with me, but I'm going to love you anyway. You know, and you may be doing bad things to other people. I'm still going to love you. I may not like you, but I'm going to love you. There's a big difference there. And to understand love, that's the first. And then have compassion. Compassion for you, compassion for me. So this is what it means to me. So if we can continue, Ed, are you able to read chapter 16? Ed Joseph. Do you have that ability to be able to read that I sent to you?
I do, yes.
Can you read that and the perfection of meditative concentration and speak a little bit on that?
Sure. The perfection of meditative concentration, analytical and stabilizing meditations, training the mind through investigation of the world and one's own life to understand temporary, momentary nature of phenomena, stabilizing the 10 virtues, organize the mind according to the different levels of meditative states.
Maybe read it one more time, please.
Sure. The perfection of meditative concentration, and analytical and stabilizing meditations, training the mind through investigation of the world and one's own life to understand temporary, momentary nature of phenomena, stabilize in the 10 virtues, organize the mind according to the different levels of meditative states. Wow. Wow. So in essence, in order to arrive to the state of perfection, the state of enlightenment, to be in the light mentally, is to perfect the mind to purification, and which is a continual and a continuous process that thought comes and goes. Thoughts come and go. And first, my understanding is to begin to conceptualize in order to develop an understanding as to what perfection is, what is meditative perfection. And because whatever you focus upon, whatever one focuses upon gets created. From formless, the thought as a spark, and to that concentration, it gives it attention. So the thought can be a desire, can develop into a desire. And once that desire is sustained from the intent to create something, to bring about certain results, then through attention, through focused attention, through focus, concentration, then one will manifest that desire into manifestation of physicality. So for example, that if I begin to think of sickness, this is not an instance, this is a real example. If I begin to think of sickness, my body, I create this feeling from the thought. I begin to create this feeling by giving it attention within my body, that I change my posture, which is the state of my being, and I begin to feel sick. And when I reverse or change the thought, feeling vibrant, change my physical posture, and I see myself stretching, being, having vitality, then I begin to feel better. So from a larger stance, to first it starts as being to analyzing what meditation is, right? Because there's so many definitions. And however, here it's meditative, is perfection of meditative concentration, the perfection of meditative concentration. And my understanding is this, that I can meditate upon something or I can meditate upon nothing. When I meditate upon nothing, I become one with everything. So that's my understanding. And that happens to practice, the practicing effect, persevering, having the patience, because because once you begin to sit, to say, you know what, I'm gonna meditate for 30 minutes, for 10 minutes, for 5 minutes. And sometimes the 5 minutes is the hardest compared to 30 minutes. Because I remember one time I tried to meditate I said, I'm gonna meditate for a week. I probably spent maybe 45 minutes altogether actively where I was totally empty out of 8 days, just 45 minutes where I know I was aware, where I was in a pure meditative state. So this is something that is, it requires the generosity of self to let go certain things. I'm saying generosity in the sense of like sacrifice for self in order to be able to experience that. It requires perseverance. It requires patience, because once you begin to try to calm the mind down, the more that you try to do it, the more that it runs, the more that it runs away, right? And you just is the discipline, just having the self-discipline to say, you know, well, you have years of history of don't even know what meditation is. And then now for 5 months, for 10 months, for a year, 2 years, however many years, right? And you try to attain perfection. So it's,
would you comment on the last sentence in that paragraph there?
sure.
Shout out loud again and comment on that.
Organize the mind according to the different levels of meditative states. Organize the mind according to the different levels of meditative states. So the mind can be brought under one's control. It's possible. And it says according to the different level of meditative states. So my understanding of this is that the mind, what you do within your mind affects the brain, the chemicals that get released from the brain into the body, into the bloodstream. You thinking good thoughts, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, anandamide, that's the joyful, blissful drug that get chemicals, neurotransmitter that get released into the bloodstream, or now you'll be happy. And there are times you see, you just feel like everything is beautiful. And that's traversing the different states, transforming, transmuting, transcending, transferring across different dimensions or different states within your being, right to the mind, by organizing from the mind, the thoughts, the emotions, the sensations, and the energies within the body. So when you can combine, where you create this awareness to focus concentration, and then now you can transform, changing the form, you can transmute to alchemically, where you can release. When the chemicals get released, that's my experience. When the different chemicals get released, I can sense it. I can literally feel within my brain, on different side of my brain, like different chemicals get released. So that's my understanding. And again, organize the mind is because we have control. We do have control over the mind, but that requires it requires work, sacrifice.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. That was very good. Would anybody else like to comment on this topic? The perfection of meditative concentration? Is contemplation part of meditative concentration? And what's the difference between contemplation and meditation?
You asking me?
I'm asking anybody.
Or anybody?
So we say that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes. In the Christian culture, there is the fundamental Catholicism, and there is the equivalent of like the mystical or the Kabbalah for Judaism, where they call it contemplative prayer, right? And or hesychasm, or they call it the Jesus's prayer, Yeshua's prayer, where you just focus upon sometimes just a name. In this case, it can be the name of God, or the name Yeshua or Jesus, right? Or Muhammad, whatever the culture might be. You just focus on that one thing in becoming one with it.
So what does that have to do with contemplation and meditation?
So my understanding within, they don't want to use the word meditation. So they use the word contemplation rather than, because meditation from the Christian culture, it is that of quote unquote Hindu, right? Even though in the book of Psalm 119, the word meditation is mentioned like probably 15 times. Okay, this is the longest book in the Bible, in the book of Psalm. There's 150 Psalm, but Psalm 119 is the longest. I think the word meditation is mentioned like probably 10 to 15 times. So for people, some people are afraid of the word meditation, but however, they okay with the word contemplation, where they're just like focusing upon pretty much like one sentence, one word, and then one prayer, and so on and so forth.
Okay, very good. Thank you. We don't have a lot of time left, so we're not going to be able to get into the chapter 16 to talk about meditative concentration. So Zara, you're off the hook for tonight. I hope you join us next time so we can talk about that. But just, the understood words are more important. So for our purpose of being able to organize our thoughts and be able to communicate and so on, we enter into a process of being able to focus, we say one-pointed mindfully on something, one-pointed mindfulness on something. And so our breathing becomes one-pointed, our brain becomes one-pointed, and then thoughts begin to come up, and we analyze those thoughts. We look at those thoughts. We may move on from those thoughts very quickly. We may marginalize them. We might say, oh, they're not important. I don't need to think about that. Or we might say, yes, this is something I need to think about. So that process of doing that is the contemplation. And then maybe the contemplation of what are all the permutations of this selection that I've made. It can manifest in many different ways. So I contemplate all the different possibilities. And sometimes we might call that worrying about something. Oh, I'm worried about this. I'm worried about that. I'm thinking about all the different things that I could have done better, or I need to do, or I need to get more information, or whatever it is. All that's part of the contemplation. At some point in this process, we exhaust all those possibilities. We rest our mind. We come to the point of just saying, I'm done. I'm not going to have to think about this, at least now, anymore. And I just rest. It's like going out and working in the yard all day long, or working out in the fields all day long, or wherever we go work that's physical labor. And then we come home and we get into our favorite easy chair and we just kind of collapse and we just kind of rest there. Well, the contemplation comes to that point of resting. And at that point of resting, something else happens. The meditation happens. The meditation rises up by itself. And what it is, it's the little mind, It's the investigative, contemplative mind that is connecting with the big mind, the heart mind. And that heart mind has to be experienced to be able to really understand it. There's no way that anybody can give you some kind of a dissertation on what that is. It has to be experienced. But there's this union that comes together between the little mind, the intellectual mind, and the big mind. And the little mind is recognizing, is seeing these things come up. And it's almost like watching a movie. You know, you're just seeing things. You're seeing wisdom that you didn't know you were capable of. And it may be in these books that we've read or teachings that we've sat in, but all of a sudden they become clear to us. Oh, that's what we're talking about. That's what this is. And you experience it for yourself. And that experience cannot ever be taken away from you. No more than if you were to go put your hand on a hot stove and burn your hand, you will know what that means to do that. When you have that experience of burning your hand, you will never forget it. Likewise, when you have the experience of your heart being open and that profound wisdom that we all have within ourselves rises up, and we begin to be able to recognize it through the intellectual mind, that's the meditation. That's what we're talking about. So thank you, everybody. Anybody have any comment about anything that we've talked about? We have a couple minutes, and was there something that we should be talking about next time? Yes, Michael.
So I might not have tuned in at the beginning of this cycle, but I don't recall, and it just strikes me that that maybe not the expectation, but the assumption is that we would be that we would enjoy reading the Jewel Ornament of Liberation sort of along with this with these cliff notes, so that we would have something to bring to the meetings, some sort of awareness of what's actually in the book, instead of having to sort of guess or interpret, a couple of sentences, or try to interpret a couple of sentences. Is it the expectation that we would be reading and then preparing ahead of time for certain sections by reading the Jewel Ornament of Liberation?
I have no expectation. It's up to you. The conversation that we have really reveals a lot about our habitual tendencies. And I think that, whether we have read the book before we come into these meetings, or we have these meetings and that gives us inspiration to read the book, either one is fine.
If either one is going to happen, yeah, they're fine. I don't see reading Cliff Notes as inspiring somebody to go buy the book. But I may be wrong. I may be wrong, because there's no challenging to come up with material that we've had time to absorb in order to make sense of the short bits that we're reading. A lot of that sense making should happen based on our understanding of the book. So I'm just not seeing it, but maybe I'm just blind. So.
Well, we're just bringing our own experience into it. Thank you.
Michael, I can appreciate that from an academic perspective, the sequence you just described from just the knowledge component, just as my own cliff note to what you said. Lance, thank you so much. I think, and I'll just say this briefly. I think one of the things I'm working on right now is I'm going through the process of like experiencing some of these things happening right now in my life where I'm like, oh, switch to compassion, right? Like it's frequently and happening more regularly. One of the things I think I'm struggling with on my journey is organizing the concepts and terms that are used to describe these processes, like the knowledge component. It's mentally overwhelming for me, like, and then I have moments, light bulb moments where I'm like, okay, the order of how this all works, and like really being very acutely aware of all of these things and how they work, and then being able to identify them in action. Like this is an example of this. So for me, I am overwhelmed spiritually with all of it. Like I'm overwhelmed mentally, like intellectually. But I'm trying to do what you always say, like just let things happen and unfold as they should. And so I go back to that moments where I want to be very hard on myself and like, you're not doing enough, you're not doing good enough or whatever. But I kind of always hear you in that phrase, let things go as they will, or unfold naturally. You have some phrase you say that's very reassuring. So, but that's kind of where I am right now, is I'm struggling with the concepts and all these component parts, and then actually the experiences. It's a little overwhelming intellectually and spiritually at the same time for me right now.
I know we're out of time, but we were talking earlier about teaching. My favorite definition of a teacher that I learned in an adult education context was a teacher is one who arranges the conditions for learning. And I think you've tried very hard to do that. I haven't and you've heard it before, Lance, but the resurgence of an ethical dilemma related to my participation in this group, which is I'm just not in a position in my life right now, and I don't mean just time, but just mental, being pulled too many different ways by too many different things, and including a church that I'm trying to make a commitment to. And is it honest for me to continue to participate in these discussions when I'm not doing homework, I'm not doing much outside, I'm not reading, maybe that's just not honest. I mean, maybe that's not fair. If that's the case, I'd like to be told that by you or other members of the group, because right now, though I'm not bringing what I'd like to be bringing, I'm bringing as much as I can, as much as I have in my capacity, and but I'm not. I'm sort of hiding in the fact that this is Buddhist 101. And I'm hanging around the basics without, well, okay, that's enough babbling, but it is something that bothers me. I don't know if it's ethical.
I don't think it's a problem. I think we all have to be self-motivated to move at our own speed, and everybody's got their own schedule. So, I've never made it a requirement. I don't think it should be a requirement, but yet I think there still needs to be the challenge to say, well, there is more. And if you want more, you've got to be more, there's ways to dig in.
Yeah.
And to just remind people about that. Otherwise, I think as a teacher, an instructor, a leader, however you wish to describe it, I'd be remiss by not reminding people that, from time to time.
Fair enough.
Can I say something?
Of course.
Mr. Jones, I love your participation. You helped me become a better Buddhist.
Oh.
You really do. You are a great teacher. Especially when you ask, Tom, why do you think that? Tom, where is this coming from? You help me contemplate. You help me meditate.
Well, thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.
Ditto, Ed. You can't leave.
No, I think everybody's great, and I look forward to these conversations too.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay. Next week, I'm taking a weekend trip to Kentucky to go to a retreat center to kind of scope it out. And it's going to be in Kentucky. It's about a day's drive from our Virginia area here, Virginia, Maryland area. And so the possibilities of what can happen in the future are limitless in terms of having a retreat center, a real retreat center to go to and so on. So I've got the opportunity to go this weekend. So my point is that next Monday I'll be traveling. So I'm not likely to be back in time to be able to have our meeting Monday night. So Monday night next week, we'll have to cancel and we'll meet the following week. So if everybody can make a note of that in your calendar somewhere, would be wonderful. And I will send out a message, email to just remind everybody. So unless there's somebody else have a comment, want to make something, we'll do our dedication. Okay, so a very short dedication on page 18 and 19. I'll read from the book here. By this virtue, may I achieve the all-knowing state. May all who travel on the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death cross the ocean of samsara by defeating all enemies, the cause of suffering. Bodhichitta, the excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. The next page. By the virtues collected in the three times, by myself and all beings, in samsara and nirvana, and by the innate word of virtue, may I and all sentient beings quickly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious enlightenment. May the teachings of the great Sri Khompa Ratna Shri, who is the founder of our lineage, who is omniscient, all-knowing, Lord of the Dharma, understands the Dharma and all its permutations, master of interdependence, master of the multiplicity, all the possibilities that our mind can conceive of. May they all continue and increase through study, practice, contemplation, and meditation until the end of samsara. Om, Ah, Hum. Om, Ah, Hum. Om, Ah, Hum. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all beings. Thank you all very, very much. I think it was very good talk. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sentence.
Thank you.